Woe to you of earth and sea, for the devil sends the beast with wrath, and his number is a NOTCAST number, number 600. No, it isn't. No, it isn't at all. Welcome to NOTCAST 409, I think, possibly 410. It is the 26th September 2024. And today I'm talking about Iron Maiden's third album, also their second debut, their first album with Bruce of Samson on vocals. And that album is The Number of the Beast. And on the 26th September 1981, it was announced that Paul Di'Anno, the voice of Iron Maiden, had left the group, and that a new singer, Mr. Bruce, had joined. And this is where Iron Maiden become the Iron Maiden that I kind of love. And obviously, I'm going to say some pretty flippant things about the band over the next hour or so. I frequently do. It has to be remembered that sometimes criticism comes from a place of love and respect. Because, I don't want to spend my time criticising something I don't particularly care about or like. It always comes from a place of wanting everything to be as good as it possibly could be. Sometimes being disappointed when things are mediocre. And obviously also, so you've got to be able to laugh with and sometimes at things. The whole point of something like, for example, some of the films that I do like is that they are ridiculous. They know they're ridiculous and they go with it. And so, I think 10th of September 1981, Iron Maiden parted ways with Paul Di'Anno. Paul Di'Anno being the band's vocalist throughout the first two albums and periods. I think August 1981 at the Reading Festival, Rod Smallwood of Iron Maiden's management and Bruce Dickinson had a conversation somewhere where everyone kind of thought, why are those two having a chat? And I think Iron Maiden had made the decision that they were going to part ways with Paul Di'Anno sometime in 1981. As I understand it, and from this book, Run to the Hills, one of just 5 Iron Maiden books I own, including this, which is written by Dave Bowler and Brian Dre. However, what I will say about this one is it's so thin, it looks like it wasn't even written by one person, let alone 2. There's also, by the way, this one, Bruce Dickinson's What Does This Button Do? Which is an interesting tale and an interesting insight into the early days of the band. There's the hardback book, which I showed you earlier. There is, of course, Gary Bushell's Cockney fantastic version of the band's life story. We might go into it and give a tale as to how he left, and of course the Mick Wall version of the book. Irrespective of all of these things, Paul Di'Anno was called into the band's office and told that he was leaving the group. According to him, he said, well, that was good because I was going to quit anyway. It wasn't really my thing, which is perhaps not strictly true. But you know how things are. You can't fire me because I quit, as good old Nirvana's had it. Rod Smallwood asked Bruce to audition before the last gigs with Paul, and Bruce learnt all the songs. He said all the songs were in comfortable keys. My voice was barely taking off, and Bruce recorded over 4 instrumental tracks taken from, I think, the Maiden Japan concert. With Paul's vocal taken off at Battery Studios. And one of those tracks, let me see where I can find it, became a B-side. Although it says, technically speaking, that it was recorded live in Italy at Bruce's first gigs. The version of Remember Tomorrow on the Number of the Beast single, here's a 7-inch from 1982, was actually the Made in Japan version with Bruce's studio vocal overdubbed. Bruce also recorded Twilight Zone, Wrathchild and Killers, all of which should have been on the B-sides of various 12-inches so people who couldn't see Iron Maiden could hear the difference between the two voices. And that's how perhaps they should have done the 12-inches. But I'm leaping straight into the B-sides. I'm not even mentioning the album. Bruce had seen Iron Maiden at the Ruskin Arms, and he thought, and I quote, I don't understand why he's there. On record, he was great, but when it came to the real thing, being on stage, he really had to get on top of it and dominate it, which didn't happen. Bruce already knew Clive Burr when Clive was playing drums in Samson, and Samson recorded Shock Tactics whilst Maiden were recording Killers. And so on the 26th of September, Bruce was ushered into the band. Steve said, I had a sneaky feeling that Paul would let us down. And he did. His voice started to give out. Apparently, it was a bit of burning, looting, raping and a shooting, to quote the Great Bad News. His voice started to crack a bit. You could tell that he was going in a different direction to the rest of the band. With Paul in the band, Maiden were more obviously new wave of British heavy metal, touches of punk, and standard rock. And if Paul was, just a vocalist, so to speak, Bruce was a front man and a singer. I always think bands are held back by perhaps their least proficient members. Sometimes they turn that limitation and that weakness into a strength. The minimalism and simplicity of certain things actually makes it very, very, becomes a band signature point sometimes. But then you kind of go, there's things the band could do that they can't do because they haven't got the person who's got the skills. I'm going to mention Lol from The Cure. It's no secret that when Lol left the group and they had different drummers, their songs became more dynamic. The drum rolls became more interesting. Songs like Just Like Heaven, In Between Days, Why Can't I Be You, open with these big drum rolls that were beyond Lol's capacity to play. Even The Walk, for example. Same thing with Paul. Paul could do one thing and he could do it very, very well, but he couldn't do the other things that Maiden needed. And with Bruce in the band, you had somebody with a wide vocal range, with a committed voice, who sounded, I think if Paul sounded like he was living those songs, Bruce sounded like he was narrating a history audio book with music. And that's not a criticism, because remember, there was a webpage in the early 2000s called Everything I Know About History I Learned from Iron Maiden. That's true, by the way, because everything I know about world history I learned from Iron Maiden. I wouldn't have known anything about the Second World War had it not been for Aces High, Tail Gunner, all the other songs about war. But of course, we're going to get to the swarm scale, sexism, war and armaments, and so on, and the other capacities that we've got that are in there when we get to the end of the episode. Instead, we're just going to give you a real flash here from page 100 of Gary Bushell's book, Running Free. If Bruce Dickinson was going to have his work cut out for him matching White Boy Diano's cockney, colourful character, there was soon to be little doubt that in terms of sheer vocal power, Dixon, who is as pro as Charlotte the Harlot, made Paul sound strictly amateur hour. The proof in plastic came in March 1982 with the release of Run to the Hills single, which was so red hot it scorched away any lingering doubts about the vocal changeover like spittle evaporating over a steaming stove. Bruce's singing might have been more grounded in the HM tradition, whatever that is, presumably heavy metal. But it was clear that the Sheffield Songbird possessed as fine a pair of hyperdynamic lungs as ever shattered a 3K rig. The gallopingly addictive 45 eventually got to number 7 on the British charts. And that is the first single with Bruce on vocals, Run to the Hills, produced and engineered by good old Martin Birch. And this was, I think, one of the widely regarded as one of the best Maiden tracks there is, a signature Maiden track. If you think, what great songs have Iron Maiden got? Sure, you go, well, it depends how deep you want to go. Lots of people will go Run to the Hills and the other ones. But again, they're not a band that necessarily gets on radio or television very much. A band that did it the old-fashioned way, like Bruce Springsteen and later on Frank Turner. They went out, they played live, they plugged it, they did the work. And at a certain point, their singles were going to sell, even if it was called The Ballad of Mary the Lamb, which, by the way, would make a fantastic Iron Maiden song. Bring your lamb to the slaughter, not your daughter, etc. Mary had a little ham. We cooked her, turned her into ham or something. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go along, much like Indiana Jones in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Never Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is the reissue title. Run to the Hills, then the first single with Bruce on vocals. In fact, backed with, and let me just quickly check, believe it's backed with Total Eclipse, which should have been on the album. Total Eclipse and Run to the Hills were the first two songs that were finished. The album was recorded in 5 weeks. Those were the first two songs that were finished and therefore the first two songs that came out. Even though, strictly speaking, I think Gangland, which is on the album, should be a B-side, and Total Eclipse should be on the album, which oddly enough Iron Maiden now agree with, and the reissues of the album have a slightly different running order. The audition that Bruce had, he sang Prowler, Sanctuary, Running Free, Murders in the Rue Morgue, and obviously also Killers, Twilight Zone, and so on. And what we had, well, the audition was 5 songs. Then he recorded 4 songs in the studio. They pretty much booked the same day. And then he was offered the job. And before the LP came out, before the album was recorded, there were 6 shows. 5 were in Italy. 1 was at the Rainbow in London. And then the band went into recording and recorded the 3rd album, Number of the Beast. And Number of the Beast is I mean, if you're going to say, what is the most atypical prototype Iron Maiden album? What is the album that you listen to and go, that's Iron Maiden in a nutshell? It is Number of the Beast, isn't it? That's the one. You listen to it, look at the track listing that you've got on there. And of course, if you don't know the band, you go, what the hell song's Children of the Damned or The Prisoner? But it's got, Number of the Beast, Run to the Hills, Hallowed Be Thy Name, 3 songs that get played live very, very frequently, and hopefully on the band's upcoming 50th anniversary stadium tour, for which I have tickets to see them at the London Stadium. Thanks, Tim. Much appreciated. Obviously, I owe you a fair chunk of cash as a result. We'll do that shortly. And it's the band's effectively their 2nd debut. Most bands that have a major lineup change have a 2nd debut. Suede had one with Coming Up. Obviously, Iron Maiden had it with Number of the Beast. Faith No More had it with The Real Thing. When you've got a major voice inside the band's lineup that comes into the group, the band suddenly becomes the same band, but a new band with a different lineup. And there is no one thing that can be imitated in a person's voice, despite what Judas Priest said when they got Ripper Owens in on vocals from a Judas Priest tribute band, is that's not the way to do it. You need to let somebody be themselves. You imagine if Iron Maiden had only ever had Paul Di'Anno or a guy with Paul Di'Anno's vocals in it, which are, better than mine, worse than Bruce's. And Paul did say, they were right to sack me a few years ago. Iron Maiden wouldn't be a big band now. They wouldn't be playing stadiums. They wouldn't be playing arenas. At best, they'd be playing theatres. You might even be seeing Paul Di'Anno's Iron Maiden and Steve Harris's Iron Maiden duelling for the mid-sized theatres of the UK and America. Yep. You might. Sorry, it's been a long day. Bruce had a sense that this was his one shot in a career as a musician, or even as just an average human being, as you go through and you change jobs. And suddenly you get a sense that someone's taking a leap of faith on you. They're giving you a shot and you sit there and you go, this is my golden chance. I've got to shoot and I've got to aim and I've got to hit. And when people talk about, for example, privilege and money, if you come from a working class background, you only get one chance to shoot your shot. You don't get multiple chances. People think about someone like Elon Musk, wanker, and go on about, how he's amazing and stuff. No, he isn't. He's just had enough money to be able to fail multiple times before he succeeded. And if you have 100 shots, one's bound to hit target, isn't it? If you only have one shot, that's it. That's your one shot. And once it's gone, it's gone. You don't get a second chance. Bruce saw this as his one shot and he was going to grapple it by the horns, take it, run it and drive it like he stole it. And of course, he landed it completely. It took the band to new places. The band's musicianship took up a step. The vocals became wider, better, more convincing, more, whatever the word is, I'm trying to think of it here, but he's a better singer, full stop. Although he was mockingly called in a letter an air raid siren by a disgruntled fan that preferred Paul Di'Anno, you go, well, actually, no, that's a really powerful thing. Yes, you've got a voice that's as strong as an air raid siren. Most bands would love to have that in their arsenal. And this is where Iron Maiden went from being, a fast car to being a Formula One sports car that can crack world records. There is no two ways about it. Iron Maiden became and were able to fulfill their potential in a way that they weren't able to do previously with Paul in the group. I said Number of the Beast is effectively the band's 2nd debut, and it always is, because the first LP is always the cream of the crop, isn't it? It's the stuff that you've been writing. The 2nd LP is the best of the leftovers. Your 3rd LP is your 2nd burst. Can you sustain it to a 3rd LP? If you can't sustain it to a 3rd LP, you've written all your songs in one go. And then the fourth LP is always hard because suddenly you're writing songs on tour and soundtracks. The cliche is it takes 18 years to write your debut album, 2 years to write your second, and 6 hours to write your third. Number of the Beast proved that if you give the band a rehearsal studio, they are on it and they can deliver and deliver in spades. And despite the fact that their work rate has slowed down over time in terms of studio releases, like lots of people, they never stopped writing. And that's really, really important. It's not like Kraftwerk where suddenly they kind of like, evaporated into dust in terms of songwriting at the age of 36 or something. Iron Maiden have gone it and done it. And the other things which Number of the Beast brought into the band were twofold. I mean, obviously harmonies. So with Bruce's voice and the backing vocals, you're able to have harmonies that moved in different ranges. You could do multi-tracks on that. There was also the ability to do, for the studio. So if you listen to the studio takes and isolated tracks, which are on the Number of the Beast classic albums DVD here released in 2002, you can hear the harmonics, and you can hear them overdubbing that's in there. And I mean, in terms of example, for Steve as his bass playing is probably at his apex on this album. Clive's drumming is fantastic. The whole thing gels really, really well, and it really adds an extra dimension. So the band had moved beyond punky and they'd gone into something that was almost like the next evolution of British heavy metal, not the new wave, but something further than that. And because Run to the Hills and Total Eclipse were the first tracks that were finished, they were the first ones that came out, and Iron Maiden did a weird thing during the recording of this album. They didn't have long to do it, and so they did early mixes, and Steve Harris was absolutely adamant he didn't like the mixes. So they listened to that at a listening party. Album's finished, hasn't yet gone to press. Play the tape for the band and some of the people that work at the record label and the management. And Steve Harris is listening to it and he's going, it's not it, it's not good enough. They go back in and remix the album at the last minute just before it goes to production. And those are the finished mixes that you've got on the album. And the band toured. So although this album was released on the 22nd of March, 1982, the band first played on I think the 25th of February with a warm-up gig, 27th of February Wolverhampton Civic Hall, all the way through to the Hammersmith Odeon on the 20th of March. And that was Iron Maiden touring Number of the Beast before Number of the Beast had come out in the UK. In fact, they played Reading in 1982, which is on the BBC Sessions CD. And that was, I think, the last UK show possibly for that. So, in fact, they only really toured the album before it came out on the back of Run to the Hills. So you imagine you're seeing Iron Maiden, they're playing Hammersmith. Here is the 2002 Beast Over Hammersmith CD. And most of the songs on the album you haven't heard. So, you're hearing Children of the Damned for the first time, Number of the Beast, 22 Acacia Avenue, The Prisoner, Hallowed Be Thy Name, whilst the band are playing them in front of you. That's the first time that the most of Britain heard the songs. At the time, if you liked Iron Maiden, was when you saw them play the Ipswich Gaumont or wherever. So people were listening to the album, and if you were going, oh, I'd love to see this band, well, too late. They toured before the album came out. But they went into America, they did 180 shows according to the book. Obviously that will really, really wear it out of you. It sold 6 million copies in the world. It was the start of what was called the Satanic Panic. So you think about Tipper Gore in 1984, Parental Advisory, things like Twisted Sister, Judas Priest, court cases, explicit lyrics, all driven by a fear of something like Number of the Beast. Now, think about Number of the Beast in this, and you can look at it if you're spectacularly ignorant, and you can say, oh, Satanism, Satan, etc. No, it's not. It's mythology, it's mystery, it's Dungeons and Dragons. As Ozzy Osbourne said, the only black magic we were into was chocolate. Iron Maiden weren't Satanists. They were just, barely out of their teens from London that were into like horror movies, and if you listen to some of the lyrics, terrible sexual assaults on women. Luckily, that dialed down dramatically once Paul left the group. Bruce was in legal stuff around his departure from Samson, so he has no writing credits on this album. I think he may have added some lyrics and things like that, but he has no writing credits on the album. His first writing credits, I think, are on Peace of Mind. And as you go into the LP, here's the original LP inner sleeve from 1982, and I believe none of the songs are written by Bruce on here, but you've got a sight for what it is. It opens with Invaders, which Steve Harris doesn't like, and that's, to be fair, it isn't particularly good. If I'd resequence the album, by the way, I'd go Number of the Beast, Run to the Hills, Invaders, Children of the Damned, Total Eclipse, 22 Acacia Avenue, The Prisoner, and Hallowed Be Thy Name. And I'd shunt Gangland over to a B-side, by the way. And the swarm scale is the lyrics have swapped misogyny, rape, and violence towards history, towards women for history and mythology. Invaders, and whilst it does open with the lyric that longboats have been sighted, the evidence of war has begun, and there's lines about, for example, let me just go. Axes grind and maces clash as wounded fighters fall to the ground. It is a little bit Jabberwocky, truth be told. And obviously that is also followed up with Run to the Hills, which is very much, the white saviour around it, where we've got the lyric about, raping the women and wasting the men. The only good Indians are tame. So there's a fair chunk of your standard old-fashioned attitudes. How much of it is in quotation marks is never exactly clear. How much of it is, to quote Echo and the Bunnymen, read it in books about history is something else. Invaders is clearly about Vikings. Children of the Damned, God knows what that's about. I reckon that's something about religion. The Prisoner, obviously inspired by science fiction and television. Patrick Doonan, I think is his name. Could be wrong. Could be something else. From The Prisoner, was rung up and said, "Could we use some speech from The Prisoner TV show?" And he was like, "Well, for a band, what kind of heavy metal, you say? Oh, what's the band called?" Iron Maiden. Do it. Boomf. So pretty definitive there. You've got 22 Acacia Avenue, and I'll be blunt, I hate 22 Acacia Avenue. It's bloody terrible. It really, really is. It's a sexist piece of trash that makes Charlotte the Harlot look like a bag of shit. The lyrics are very much around, meet a lady I know, so if you're looking for a good time and you're prepared to pay the price, 15 quid is all she asks for. Which, by the way, inflation adjusted is £48 today. So it's not exactly a high-class establishment there. And also, the lyric is around, Charlotte can't get you out from all this madness. Can't you see it only brings you sadness when you entertain your men? Don't you know the risk of getting disease? I'm like, really? This is stuff that's like, if you put this into a filter in Google and said, how smart, what's the reading age of this album? They go like 8 years old. And the attitudes displayed towards women are very basic, minimal. Certainly for Acacia Avenue, it's the idea that women only exist as orgasm delivery machines. Live removal machine, as the cult had it, and even on things like Run to the Hills and so on, and Invaders. The clear implication is women only really exist to be assaulted, which, by the way, I will give Bruce the credit of singing, but he didn't write the lyrics for it, which is thank God, because if you listen to Iron Maiden and Killers, it's obviously a tale of sexual assault on 33 RPM, whereas this is more like a tale of historic bombast and terror. You half imagine if this was a film, it would be directed by Terry Jones, starring Eric Idle, and it would feature a lot of castles and galloping horses. Because of all of that, and the satanic panic that went with it, we had effectively a moral panic. There's always a moral panic. Somebody looks at TikTok or Zombie Knives, or if you go a bit further back, heavy metal music, rave, whatever it is. There's always something that's the reason why society is falling to pieces, and it's never the actual reason why society is falling to pieces. If you want to think about, well, what's the cause of, let's say, moral decline in the UK or moral decline in the world, it's almost never Iron Maiden records. Occasionally, one could argue that the fact that Iron Maiden records had to be brought in the grey market into East Germany was a substantial reason for the fall of the Berlin Wall, because the children are, to quote Twisted Sister, they ain't going to take it. You could look at that, but you could also go, well, actually, it's about trying to minimise legitimate kind of speech and expression. You know, the idea that if you look at somebody who's maybe 18 and you're an old person, and yeah, I'm old, but you know, you look at them and go, well, we'll introduce national service. Thanks, Rishi, you blithering idiot. And we'll force them to do a trade they don't want to do because they don't know discipline and responsibility. And it's like, well, think about Knights of Reb's fun to be had. You know, you are young, they are old, control is all they've got to give. All they're trying to do is to turn you into war slaves and treat you with contempt and go, you owe this country something. And it's like, when I needed my country when I was 18 or 19, for example, and I was at university and I wanted, you know, some money, so I could have a life. They were like, no, you have to rely on pocket money from your mum and dad so we can get you off the unemployment figures so it can look good at election time that unemployment figures are low. And from my point of view, I went, you're going to charge me X% on my income for the rest of my life. And yet when I had absolutely nothing and I wanted the state to help me, there was no reciprocity, whatever the word is there. There's no reciprocity. You know, I wanted the state to go, we will reward you now with a little bit and you will pay us when you start to earn. But effectively, I was shut out from society by the fact that I wasn't worth £37 a week, and I could have really done with £37 a week as a 19-year-old at university, because literally that was the only money I had to have any fun with whatsoever. Being 20, going through your final stages of your degree and having to rely on your mum and dad for pocket money when you're going to be 21 in 3 months' time, because of the fact the state wants to keep the unemployment figures down to increase their chances of getting elected. You kind of say, I'm never going to forget that, thank you. I'm never going to forget the fact that you put people into such poverty and indignity. And yes, that might sound petty, but more correctly, it's important to remember what's happened to you before. Otherwise, you become very short-sighted and myopic. And if you don't know how you got to where you are, you're never going to understand where you are. You know, you have to know how you got there in order to be able to understand the journey that you've taken. The journey, of course, for Iron Maiden was back into the past for more murder, looting, raping and a shooting. And so we have side 2 opens with, of course, The Number of the Beast, one of the best Iron Maiden songs of all time. My favourite, by the way, is sung by Blaze Bayley. Yeah, that's a shocker. I suspect there's very few people that will say that. This was the second single that was released from the album. 7-inch, 12-inch, probably a picture disc of some description. I never bothered with those because I always saw music. I always saw singles, albums as music delivery systems. I wasn't interested in necessarily as skull-shaped picture discs. I wasn't interested in merchandising. I was interested in hearing new songs by bands because music is merchandise. When you think of that brand identity for a group. And yeah, sure, Iron Maiden have got Eddie here. Eddie is effectively their mascot, like, you know, the Tongue by the Stones or Rivet Head from Megadeth, or even the Robots for Kraftwerk. But what they did have is, especially on some of the support shows, and they were supporting, I think, ZZ Top in America, they were selling more T-shirts than the headline act. And EMI renegotiated the deal with them at this point. The EMI realised they were onto a winner, and Iron Maiden did as well. So there was a 6-figure deal. Rob Smallwood brought on Andy Taylor to do some management activity. The band managed the cash flow very, very tightly. Oh, hang on a second. Right, well, that explains something, and sorry for the mild delay in service. I have a cat. In fact, I'm going to introduce him to you in a minute. He pulled this down and broke it. So let's go and see what he has to say about that. Hey, dude. Okay, so this guy is Tinker, and he doesn't like being held. He's a British short-hair cat. He is about a year old, and he's not very affectionate. His nearest he'll come to affection is sitting on you, or sitting near you, or putting his paw on you. He hates being picked up, as you've probably just seen. However, he is a little kitten, and he has just broken my fabulous on-air sign that I now have to replace, but that's okay, because it was going to happen anyway. So I have to pick up from where I was talking about Iron Maiden's journey, knowing that I then have to go replace a bit of neon lighting in a minute. Eddie was the band's mascot, and they became as symptomatic of the band as anything else. So you think about Iron Maiden, you think about 2 things. Firstly, you think about operatic songs about history with screechy guitars. The second one is you think about a weird fucked up grinning skull that does crazy, stupid things on covers. And sometimes you can look at Iron Maiden and you kind of go, right, so Iron Maiden are effectively, if you were a 14-year-old boy and you were given all the money and power in the world, what would you do with it? Well, of course you'd form a band called Iron Maiden and you do songs about history, girls and war. And I make no mistake about it, first time I saw an Iron Maiden, hilarious. I couldn't stop laughing all night long, and then I got air guitar RSI, which I'm looking forward to experiencing again. But also, Iron Maiden, if you think about who you are as a 14, 15-year-old and go, would the adult version of me connect to, or more correctly, would the child version of me connect to the adult? If the adult version of me met the child version of me, would I recognise me in the child version? And would the child version go, yeah, turned out all right as an adult? The child version of me would probably go, dude, where's your hair? And then probably look at the record collection and go, that's quite good. Keep up the good work. You know, well, certainly as you get older, and as I get older, the idea of being able to spend my money on what I want to spend it on and effectively buying all the things I wanted when I was 14 is pretty much living the dream, really. I never sit down and go, I really want to buy a shed. Yes, I've got a shed. I don't sit there and go, I want to buy paint. I kind of sit there and go, can I buy an Iron Maiden picture disc? Can I buy a Front 242 DVD? Oh, what's a DVD? Oh my God, it's like a CD with pictures. You know, that's the kind of thing. And you kind of go, you take the child with you into your adulthood, and that in itself becomes something. Iron Maiden had become a major business at this point. Obviously, when I was 14, I wasn't thinking about Iron Maiden in terms of business, taxes, tax arrangements, or flights, or anything like that. I was going, yeah, these lyrics are a bit daft. They're not speaking to me about my life, but my God, the drumming and air guitar is good. The principle that Iron Maiden had, and this is one of the reasons why they've become very, very good, very successful, is the principle is never be chased for a bill, never be in debt, never have a tax problem. Always be well organised, always pay your bills on time, always make sure you've got enough money in the bank, cut your cloth. And so the band chased payments when they were on tour. They ran cash flow forecasts. They ran tight cash flow if they needed money, for example. And at a certain point they did, up to the Number of the Beast period, they booked a tour because they needed money to pay for recording studios. And then at a certain point they went, right, we've got enough cash now to be self-sufficient, to be able to operate to our own speed. And the band changed as well. The songs became more dynamic. They had more operatic sections in it. The vocals were wider. There was less punk around it. It was more classic rock. But at the same time, the lyrics moved away from burning, looting, raping and a shooting, random sexual violence, into something that was far more, not mature, because Iron Maiden would never mature apart from until probably they got the time to the X Factor in 1995, but something that was far, far less immediate gratification based. Completely. And the songwriting pattern that the band had at this point, by the way, is apparently Steve whistled the vocal lines into a tape recorder. So you can think, you know, the Trooper as being a cheerful postman. Bruce just did it. For example, his approach was very much a case of, this is my shot, I will take it. And he knocked it out of the park. And as he said, you know, listening to the Paul Di'Anno era material, is that it was very comfortable and his voice wasn't even taking off. Martin Birch said, this is your identity, you don't sing it, you live it, you believe it, you inhabit it. And Bruce, to an extent, I think, and the rest of the band became possessed by the song and not by the self-image. They weren't going, I'm writing a song about being a bad boy cockney, call blimey governor. It's more like, I'm going to live this song, I'm going to present it, I'm going to possess it. This song is going to be my reality for the length of the song. And that's pretty much, you know, how all of the songs work. Even though some of the songs very clearly, if you listen to the lyrics, you will think, okay, so really you're a time-travelling Doctor who's been a Viking and an executed prisoner, and a man who uses prostitutes and sex workers, and oh God, it's awful. It really is awful. And you've been executed at least twice for your crimes. And then, of course, we have the definitive track, The Number of the Beast. And The Number of the Beast, by the way, the song that kept back, kind of restrained vocal, I left alone, the night was dark, etc. And then the bit where suddenly the drum lines come in and Bruce lets open this enormous scream, and you kind of go, okay, this is a new band. This isn't, Portiano couldn't come within 1,000 miles of that sound. It's when he does that scream on Number of the Beast, and you go, oh, this band aren't taking prisoners at all. They are shooting to kill. And the drumming is very, very good, but fractures were occurring in the band at this point. So the band didn't release any live material at this point. There was just the album, and there wasn't a live album. There was Made in Japan, and there was Real Live Plus One if you were in Greece or wherever. But there wasn't any live material. But I think this would have been something where the band actually really should have released a live album and shown people exactly how good they were live. Because obviously the bootleg industry went through the roof, and there was a number of bootlegs. Here's one that's pretty good. Here's a song for you. The band played New York in 1982, and this was broadcast on the radio. The set was heavily weighted at the start towards the Portiano era songs, so Murders in the Rue Morgue, Wrathchild, for example. Phantom of the Opera, and then led into the Bruce era material. This is a relatively recently issued bootleg vinyl LP, about £14 on juno.co.uk, by the way. And if you don't want to pay 70-something pounds for the Beast at Hammersmith reissue, and you want an affordable live album from the period, this is probably as good as it gets. I think it's fair to say. That's quite good. And then in 2002, with the release of Eddie's Archive, the band finally released the Hammersmith live album. Now, Hammersmith was intended to be released as a concert VHS, but the lighting wasn't particularly good. 45 minutes of it was released on Iron Maiden's Early Years DVD here from 2005. So that's 45 minutes of the Beast at Hammersmith, reconstructed and previously unseen footage because it wasn't particularly well shot. The lighting wasn't particularly good. It looked very, very dark and very grainy. So only 45 minutes of it was on the DVD. But it was originally intended to be released as a VHS, but it didn't happen. And of course, they recorded the Hammersmith show, which also was potentially a live album, but they decided to go into the studio and keep going. But what you do get with Beast over Hammersmith is a full live set from the period, which is absolutely fantastic. Set list is Murders in the Rue Morgue, Wrathchild, Run to the Hills, Children of the Damned, Number of the Beast, Another Life, Killers, 22 Acacia Avenue, it has awful lyrics, Total Eclipse, Transylvania, I think that's the instrumental, The Prisoner, Hello Be Thy Name, Phantom of the Opera, Iron Maiden, Sanctuary, Drifter, Running Free, and Prowler. And these were all real examples of just how good on vocals Bruce was. He's a kind of phenomenal voice. 2002's Eddie's Archive, which is now probably deleted and expensive to get, has the CD edition. I think last year's Number of the Beast reissue has it as a triple vinyl. But I decided not to get that on the grounds that, frankly, I'm running out of shelf space and money. So, Beast over Hammersmith, absolutely essential, worth getting if you can get it. A great live album at that point. And as Rollins said, live is the only way to know for sure. The tour was a little tricky, and this is kind of detailed in the books. Run to the Hills, and what does this button do? And I think that tour was also backed up by, as I said, the 12-inch singles. Here's the 1990 First 10 Years box set. And in the First 10 Years box set, we have the Run to the Hills and Number of the Beast 12 inches. This is just this is only 5 tracks, which means the 12 inches only had one song on each side. A real waste, to be honest. And as I said, if you'd have put, the studio recordings of Wrathchild, Killers, for example, Twilight Zone, you could have really shown to people this is how good Bruce is on vocals, and would have probably silenced a few of the critics that were, the band isn't the same anymore. No bands are the same. Everything changes over time. Everything evolves. The tour became increasingly difficult, as highlighted here and in here. Clive was starting to flag. Now, Clive had multiple sclerosis, and that, if you don't know, is a subject matter that's very close to my heart, and that is that effectively your body misdiagnoses the healthy cells in your body are cells that need to be attacked. So your nervous system, when you get poorly and ill, you generally tend to recover because your body correctly identifies, for example, cold, flu, whatever, and it goes, right, I need to fix that, and it throws, corrective chemicals and neutrons or whatever it does at this infected part of your body. Multiple sclerosis misdiagnoses those, and so the cells attack healthy cells in your body with lesions, for example, and then it actually makes you sick in ways that you're not expecting. So it's kind of like if someone said, you've got a cold, and to fix that you need to have chemotherapy. Your body effectively decides no, you need to have chemo just because I think you've got a cold, but you haven't really got anything. And then it makes your muscle responses change. So, for example, you lose your dexterity, you lose your balance, physical strength, your ability to control your motor functions, affects your ability to necessarily remember words or actions or things that you need to do, affects your physical abilities. So if you're a drummer, for example, firstly, you can't drum as well as you used to do. Secondly, your body isn't doing what you're telling your body to do. You're telling your body to do this particular fill, and it's not happening. Instead of going boom, it sounds like boom, boom, boom. Nico, who replaced Clive, had a stroke a year or two ago, maybe January 23, and has recovered to the point where he's able to play to probably 95% of his capacity. Clive was probably at that point where his body was ceasing him and he didn't necessarily know, or it wasn't serving him and he didn't know necessarily how to fix it. And when you're that age, let's say you're 25, 26, 27, you're touring America, you're drinking, staying up late, indulging yourself, and MS isn't a kind of situation where it kind of goes, hi, I'm MS, I'm going to fuck up your life. You just kind of have moments where you kind of think, he's drunk. When people have MS, for example, and they go into hospitals, A&Es, they might be slurring their words, they might have forgotten what words they're using, they might be dropping things. The automatic assumption, it presents itself very, very similar to being drunk. And so the idea was, or at least the band thought, Clive's still drunk. He's hanging and playing drums. What's that all about? There's a section in here where Bruce talks about, for example, that he would, Clive was slowing down and he would sit and then him and Steve would have an argument and Bruce would lie down on stage because it wasn't professional to have that kind of discussion in front of an audience. Adrian Smith stopped drinking. Clive was always late for buses and things, had too much luggage, and of course his ability to perform was being compromised by an illness which nobody really realised he had. Clive was sacked by Adrian and Dave, although I think that decision was a long time coming. Clive's dad died when the band were on tour. Nico subbed for some shows, and then Clive played the last show in Japan. So the band had already got another drummer who was helping, and then Clive was fired. Rightly or wrongly, I think when you're young and there's not a huge amount of information that's going out about something and you kind of don't really necessarily know exactly what's happening. And in those days, you couldn't just Google it and go, slurred speech, slowing down, missing drum fills. Oh, it's obviously MS. No, could be drug. You'd only have to talk to a doctor, and MS presents itself in a very insidious way. You only find out about it by absence as opposed to presence. It's not like suddenly you get gangrene and you look at your leg and go, oh, fuck, it's gangrene. It's invisible. It's really, really difficult. The period normally between the first sign of symptoms and diagnosis is 10 years. It's much rarer in men than it is in women. And so it's a difficult situation to be in, especially if you're a drummer in Iron Maiden. Your first assumption isn't MS. Your first assumption is better not have that lager and that cheeky snort of coke. Not suggesting that Clive did that. I don't know. I'm sure some people did, but according to the book, Bruce says Steve and Bruce were always clean as a whistle in that respect. When Clive's dad died, Clive couldn't play some shows. Nico subbed in, and then the tour ended in Japan, and Clive was effectively fired from the band. And that means that Iron Maiden had replaced a drummer, they'd replaced a singer, they'd taken an enormous leap forward. They'd sold 6 million copies. in the world since release. And as Bruce says here on page 122 of What Does This Button Do? They had such a terrific onstage row in St. Louis that Clive went into slow motion in protest. I didn't help matters by bringing out a pillow and 2 blankets and pretending to sleep on the middle of the stage in protest. Once the rot starts in a band, it's like a dog with a bone. It's always there, waiting to be gnawed on. We were too busy to talk about it, too close to escape from it, and too tired one minute and full of adrenaline to be rational about it. The juggernaut rolled on, but one wheel was rolling, and boy, did we roll on. The band played everywhere. They did everything. This was their one shot, and they took it and they ran with it, and they went as far as they possibly could. In fact, my philosophy, as people say, what's your ambitions? My ambitions are always to have the talents that I have take me as far as they possibly and reasonably can. And this is what Iron Maiden did. They saw their opportunity and they took their one shot and they went for it. And they went from being a very promising band to being legends. And so the last bit we wrap up on is, oh no, that's not it, the swarm scale. So for those of you that know the swarm scale, I will tell you all about it. The swarm scale is a scientifically proven measure where I kind of look at a number of factors and then rate each one of the songs on the lengths of various factors that go into it. So swarm, S is, and let me just quickly bring the spreadsheet up. S is sorcery and ghosts, by the way. The W, so that's there you go. So that's sorcery and ghosts is your first one. Your double one is their weaponry and armaments. The A is for, the W is for war and history. So sorcery and ghosts is your first one. War and history is your second. Armaments is your third. Religion is your fourth. And misogyny, your M, is your last. So let's see how Number of the Beast works. So there you go. So you've got Invaders there. It gives you a total score of 100. Let me just quickly check. 109, which places it middle of the pack with the Maiden albums. Some of the later ones are far, far worse. And an average song score, and this is quite high, of 13.625. And the reason it's 13.625 is because some of the songs are absolutely dripping in bad stuff. So Invaders, for example, has your sorcery there. That's your S. That's your W's there for your war and armaments. And that's your A. Your R, of course, is religion, which is not present in Invaders. In fact, religion only scores a 6 on Number of the Beast. And of course, your misogyny, which is your M on Invaders, is a 6 because, well, there's a lot of murdering, looting, raping and a shooting in there. In fact, it's fair to say Number of the Beast is one of the less offensive of the Maiden albums from a lyrical perspective. That said, Number of the Beast, the title track, of course, scores 666, a score of 18, above the average for the album. In fact, the lowest scoring song on the album is The Prisoner, which only has a 2, and that 2 only relates to armaments and violence, about escape and so on. And you're probably the least, the highest scoring song is Invaders, because obviously that's about Vikings invading. So there's sorcery and ghosts there because the Vikings heavily believed in Norse mythology. There was war and history. There's armaments and violence, religion, which has a 0 because that's not the same as sorcery and ghosts. And then you have your misogyny, which goes through it. Children of the Damned only scores 10. Prisoner is 2. 22 Acacia Avenue scores a 9. Although it's, to be fair, it scores a 3 on armaments and violence because it interplays sexual assault. And its misogyny is 6, which is easily the worst score on the album that we've got. Number of the Beast scores is 666. So that's 6 on sorcery and ghosts, 6 on armaments and violence. And it scores a 6 on religion, unsurprisingly, but nothing on misogyny, because even though there's a human sacrifice, it's not a sexual human sacrifice as such. Ancient chants were, etc., etc. Run to the Hills, raping the women, killing the men. Well, that's going to score yourself a 4 on your misogyny because it's more about power than sex. Gangland scores 12. Hallowed be thy name, although I've spent it Halloween, which is perhaps not so good. Has a 6 on sorcery and ghosts because obviously it's about death and the afterlife. 6 on armaments and violence because it's about a man being hung, and 6 on religion because of course it's about Death. Total Eclipse only scores 10, but technically it's a B-side, so that doesn't really count. So that therefore gives us a total of 109 on the scientifically proven swarm scale. Oh, no, you don't need to see that on the swarm scale. And obviously 13.62 per song on average, which, by the way, is not the highest. I believe Senjutsu gets 15.3 on its average per song. But there you are. In fact, even A Matter of Life and Death gets 14.2, and Brave New World gets 14.5. So it's fair to say that Number of the Beast is by no means the most egregious of Maiden albums. I think it's an absolute classic as far as Maiden albums go. If you're going to introduce anybody to Iron Maiden, this is the album to go for. If you don't want to introduce people to Iron Maiden, I'm not going to mention which album is my least favourite, but if you don't like it, you probably won't like any of them, actually, come to think of it, because Iron Maiden are remarkably consistent throughout the whole of their career in terms of the quality of what they deliver. To say that they've done a bad album is probably not true. They've done albums that sound a lot like other albums, but they've never actually done a bad one. They've just moved from a punk band into effectively some kind of prog metal act. Perhaps, let's just thank God that Steve Harris can't play the flute and the band isn't called Jethro Tull. So there you are. So that's 50 minutes. Good God, that's quite a while of me talking about Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast. Longer than the album is, by far. And for those of you who've recently joined the channel, thanks to my filming of the David Gilmour set, or a song from the David Gilmour set at Brighton at the weekend, thanks very much for joining. Glad you watched this. If you made it this far, fantastic. There's lots more to watch. And if you gave up about 48 minutes ago, then it doesn't really matter what I say at this point, because you're not watching, are you? No, you're not. So take care of yourselves and each other. Stay beautiful, beautiful ones, and see you soon. Bye-bye. Oh, yeah. And as they said at the end of a certain Iron Maiden B-side, some cunts recording this.